everyone. We are so pleased that you're able to join us this evening for what is now our second annual International Women's Day panel discussion with female ambassadors to the United States, and welcome to you all. Last year, we had the honor of hearing from the ambassadors of Kosovo, Albania, New Zealand, Finland, El Salvador, and Sweden. And today, we are equally honored to have with us this year the ambassador of Oman, Her Excellency Hunaina Mughairy. Thank you for being here. The ambassador of Rwanda, Her Excellency Mathilde Mukantabana. Did I get that sort of? Okay. You'll have to bear with me on the pronunciation. The ambassador of Afghanistan, Her Excellency Roya, Rahmani. And the ambassador of Iceland, Her Excellency Bergdís, Ellertsdóttir. I know this tonight will be a terrific discussion about women's political participation around the world. And the Women in Politics Institute that is putting on tonight's event, and I am the executive director of the Institute. And our mission is very simple: to close the gender gap in political leadership. We are one of the few organizations that would love to be out of business in a few years. What we do at the Institute through our academic training, through our leadership and campaign training programs, doing our research, and of course, events like this evening. Here in the U.S., we did elect a record number of women to Congress in 2018, yet we still rank 78th out of 191 countries in terms of the percentage of women in our legislature. So our goal tonight is simply to learn about the successes and the struggles of other countries to develop a deeper appreciation for what women around the world in different cultures and forms of government are doing in their quest for equality and representation. I also want to thank our co-sponsors here at AU for their support this evening, the International Relations Society, the Kennedy Political Union, the Student Government's Women Initiative, and the Foreign Policy Service sorority here, Delta Phi Epsilon. They have helped us tonight with promoting the event and have helped volunteering as greeters, etc. And so we are happy to have their participation. The theme, fittingly, for this year's International Women's Day is Each for Equal. And that's a hashtag if you want to tweet tonight, Each for Equal. And the tagline for the celebration is an equal world is an enabled world. And that really forms, I think, the perfect basis for our discussion this evening. So the four incredible women we have assembled here each brings her own personal story as a woman in politics and public service and brings her unique perspective on the successes and challenges for women's equality in her own country. So you all should have their official bios in your program, but I would like to start and give each ambassador just a few minutes to share a bit about their career path and the state of women's equality in their home country. And then I'll have some few follow-up questions, and then we'll save plenty of time for your questions as well. So let me start here. You are the senior ambassador of the panel, and so protocol dictates that. You have been ambassador to the United States for almost 15 years. Incredible. And you are the first Arab woman appointed to serve as ambassador to the United States. Tell us, first of all, how you have a great story, how you first became ambassador, and how you have the challenges that you've faced, and sometimes the misconceptions that you've had to dispel along the way.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Betsy. It's a pleasure for me here to address. We have a couple of men here, but more in the audience. I keep saying, that it's true I've been here for 15 years, and I'm not the most senior because I have 4 other ambassadors ahead of me, but they're all men.
Yeah.
So I'm the most senior woman ambassador to the United States. I've been here 15 years. When people say 15 years, and I say they either forgot about me or they like what I'm doing. But I'm hoping they like what I'm doing. I'm not a career diplomat. My husband's the career diplomat. When he got posted to New York as our permanent representative to the UN, I retired from the government. I'm an economist by profession. I retired from the government and wanted to join my husband in New York because I went to school at NYU, so I thought, oh, I'll be able to do things that I couldn't do as a student. Now that I'm the ambassador's wife, I'll be able to do lots of things that I couldn't afford to do before. The government asked me to set up the Center for Investment Promotion. And so in that position, I got caught up discussing the free trade agreement between Oman and the United States. So I used to fly up and down all the time from New York, and every time we had negotiations, and the government, His Majesty actually, decided that instead of me flying up and down, I was given the offer that I couldn't turn down as ambassador from Oman to the United States. The challenges I faced, okay, my first position was, my first responsibility was negotiating the free trade agreement between Oman and the United States. As the first Arab woman ambassador, it kind of opened doors for me because not many people in Congress had seen an Arab woman, a professional Arab woman, let me put it that way. So there are times I'd walk in there and there'd be somebody there with somebody doing the translation for me because they assume that an Arab woman wouldn't be able to speak English. Another time I walked in with my deputy, who was a man, and the congressman, not mentioning name, would make a beeline to my deputy. And of course, after an embarrassment, he would point that I was the ambassador. I would say, Congressman, I only need your vote. I'll forgive you once you vote for me. So, in a nutshell, that's that's how I became ambassador from Oman to the United States. Oman is a monarchy. We have a sultan, and we're very lucky to have a sultan who was very progressive, and who, from his first speech when he took over as the Sultan of Oman, he said, women and girls are not far from our thoughts. They will have equal rights, the same rights as men have in Oman. We're a conservative country, so it has not been very easy. It's quite a challenge. But since we had a progressive leader, it kind of opened doors for us, where it's a country which has 26 cabinet ministers, and 4 out of the 26 cabinet ministers are women. We have women in all walks of life, in the lawyers, in the professional life, lawyers, engineers, doctors. Again, coming back to what His Majesty's speech was when he first took over, he said, I cannot leave women and from the government. You need, for a bird to fly, you need both wings. With just one set of wings, a bird will not be able to fly. So, because he was very progressive and he opened doors for us, when I was ambassador here to the United States and my husband is ambassador at the UN, we got the same rights, equal pay, equal rights, whatever he got, I got here. I was a bit disappointed when I was in New York because I was working with the private sector to find out that in the private sector in the United States, women do not have the same equal pay as men. And I kept saying to myself, here we're comparing ourselves to the United States and the women in the United States, not in the government, but in the private sector. But I'm hoping that things like that will change. Hoping very soon, now we're in an election year, we have one woman who's still in the run for the Democratic side. If she doesn't make
what time is it?
if she doesn't make it as the front runner, maybe as a vice president.
Yeah. Well, the fact that we had 6 women running and the debate stage with several women was incredible.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So maybe soon we'll be able to see a woman in the United States. We have 2 houses, the Consultative Council and the State Council. The State Council is an elected body by His Majesty the Sultan, and there are 86 members in both the 2 houses. And the State Council, which is an appointed body, which is like the Senate here, but ours is appointed. We have 15 women. And in the Consultative Council, unfortunately, we have only 2 women, and that's an elected body. which was very disappointing. We had 6 women, we had about 40 women running for that, for those seats, but unfortunately only 2 women won. I think otherwise I'll keep on talking. So maybe
We'll have other questions, I know. Yeah, so Ambassador Mukantabana of Rwanda was first appointed the ambassador in 2013, and prior to that, she was actually in academia as a tenured professor of history at Kusumnus, is that how you pronounce it? River College in Sacramento. Her story, obviously because of years of ethnic strife, followed by the Rwandan genocide, is one of great tragedy, but also great triumph. And you have a wonderful personal story. So could you share with us a little bit of that as well?
Thank you so much, Betsy, and thank you. It's always a pleasure to be on the same podium with my colleagues and everyone, and especially to be among students. I know the students I was teaching before I came here. My trajectory is similar to many Rwandan people who came from my country. We evolved. I was born in a country that has a very bad political system that was ostracizing some members of our community. So I left my country when I was 13, very young, went to refugee camps, studied in Africa. I was in Burundi, then eventually ended up in California because there was a guy who was in California going to school at UCLA. We ended up being married, and I stayed in California and was able to build my own career. But also we were very active in the Rwandan community to try to fight against statelessness, especially we were activists. We started a non-profit organization in California called the Friends of Rwanda Association. So that was taken back to Rwanda even though I was living in California. So initially we were fighting to reclaim our country, to go back and to end the refugee status. Unfortunately, in 1994, a horrible genocide claimed the lives of our parents, so the people who stayed in the country died. And I lost my people, but we felt it was always our responsibility to go back and especially to build something, a semblance of a good society. And our country almost died, but then within the last 26 years, when we speak, we tried to take the ashes and to mold a great society, and that's how I was called to go and be the ambassador of Rwanda to the United States. I'm a political appointee. I was not a career diplomat, obviously. I was teaching full-time. I was tenure faculty. And I answered the call because Rwanda was always part of my life. And especially that we had the leaders who wanted to bring all of the Rwandans together, who were able to empower everyone, especially women. The women were part of our reconstruction. They pulled the communities together. The ones who didn't have parents were given homes to people who had lost their own children. So we're able to blend our community and to be able to pull ourselves from the ashes. Rwanda now is, we had in our political philosophy from the beginning, even before genocide, that women have to be part and parcel of our life. That you can't exclude 20% or 50% of your population and then to think that you are developing. So for us, really we take it very seriously. Senator Hillary Clinton said that women's rights are human rights, and that was what we went with. It was a philosophy from the beginning. At the current time, Rwanda has about 61% in parliament. Women are the majority. Half of our cabinets are women, and the biggest portfolio because they do a good job, and they were part of our development. And obviously, it's something that maybe we'll discuss later, but I can tell you that it's one of the best experience to be part of that experience in Rwanda. And we build. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ambassador Rahmani of Afghanistan is the first woman ambassador of Afghanistan to the United States. She assumed her position here in 2018, And she also studied here in the United States, getting her master's in public administration from Columbia and doing her undergraduate work in Canada at McGill University. So what inspired your success in public service and politics? Give us a little bit of your story.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's great to be here. I share the same sentiment. It's wonderful to share this space with my colleagues. And thanks everybody for coming. What inspired me is just honestly from childhood, it was a question. And the question was that I couldn't really understand the binary gender roles. Why men are doing certain things, women certain things. Who has decided? Why should they be there like that? But if you like the other side, would that be even possible or not? I grew up in Afghanistan, and I share some of your background, living with a refugee and living a life of uncertainty. First of all, growing up with this sense of questioning of why, and the reasons that whenever I searched for were, well, you are a woman, you are a girl, he's a boy, this is a woman, that's a man, but that never really satisfied me. So I really always was striving to find other ways that what if I like something different? I want to share a small example. Growing up as a girl child in Afghanistan, we didn't have a lot of opportunities, especially because it was a context of conflict and war. So on Fridays, when I was a little child, the men would go kite running. And the women would all get together in houses and chit-chat or whatever. And I liked the kite running and not the chit-chatting. So, and I didn't know what to do about it. When I was much younger, I would insist that I'm going. And then finally, in order to get rid of me, they would take me. But then they wouldn't give me the kites to run. Things like that. But more than everything, it was the economic dependencies that I noticed in women. That really was a driver for me to search for other things. Again, living the very uncertain life that people live in the conflict zones. I made a motto for myself that you have to make the best out of whatever is available to you. So I hopped around, started medicine, I graduated from engineering, and then I went to the public administration in terms of my education background. But the idea of service was really about giving back, about finding how, where I would be able to find fulfillment, and also passing it on to the others.
Dr. Ellertsdóttir of Iceland. You are just in your post just under a year here in the U.S. But you were in New York previous to that as a permanent representative to the UN there. And she first came to the United States, I love this, when she was 16 years old to be an au pair for a family in Maryland. And so now you've come full circle. Tell us about your path and, of course, the great success that your country has had in terms of women's equality.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to this panel, and it's great to be here. My first time in this university, but hopefully not the next. We have a pupil here, or a student, who is now working in our office, helping us to understand the US system. We are glad to see you here. Well, I mean, compared to my colleagues here, especially from Rwanda and Afghanistan, I mean, my path has been so easy. You know, as women from my parts of the world, I mean, we are very privileged. We have not, not been in refugee camps or had our family killed, and you know, so the circumstances are so different. And I do so much admire these women who have really had to, sacrifice and work so hard to get to where they are. I mean, I have, I come from simple backgrounds, but I have big dreams, and And for me, it was maybe more like a sense of an adventure that I wanted to be part of the foreign service. And I'm a political scientist. I studied in Germany, in the UK, and of course also in Iceland. So just, so the starting point for women in Iceland is so different. Of course, it wasn't always that way, and as you say, we have now reached we have really, I think, 9 years in a row, we have been on top of the gender index, exactly. And actually, as someone said before me here, I mean, we are lonely there. We want everyone to be in that seat, and that's, as you were saying, I mean, your aim is to be obsolete, that there is no gender gap in political leadership, and we would very much want there is no gender index because we don't need it any longer. But Iceland's path has been, I mean, it didn't come by itself. There was a lot of courageous women who fought for this, and because we're talking about political participation, I mean, into the late 70s, there were very few women in parliament. I mean, I think 1975 or 8, I mean, there were 5% of parliament. I mean, I find it unthinkable. It's not so long ago, the 70s. And you may have heard that women in Iceland went on this big strike in 1975 and walked out of the... Yeah, exactly. They just said, okay, if you don't feel that we are important, we'll show you. So they just left their workplaces. And they were protesting being paid 60% of what the men were paid, but they were also protesting that there were so few women in politics. And they had to change that. But actually, nothing changed until there was a special women's list that was established, and they came into parliament in 1983, bringing the numbers up from 5% to 15%, in the election after that up to 23%. So the point is maybe that these things don't happen by themselves. You really have to, it's very comfortable to have political parties which just do their things year after year, very traditionalist. The men are there in the top seats and all of that. So it needed this kind of special action with this women's list to change the picture.
And how did it change? And you also elected the first female president, I think, in the world, right?
Yes,
From Iceland.
in 1980.
And that must have had an impact.
It had an enormous impact. But she has said she would not have become president if this women's strike had not been prior to that, because it really put a focus. It started the whole thing going. So you have the women's strike, then you have her being, elected president. You have the women's list, and it kind of gets things going. It's the engine to the change, you might say.
There's a lot of discussion about quota systems around the world, and Iceland does not have a quota system per se, but your parties rank women, have a system to rank women in the party component. Is that right?
Well,
How does that work?
It differs from one party to the other,
Yeah.
but none of the parties have strict quota systems. But what I want to underline is that in the beginning, or in the 80s, it was an effort for the parties, and they actually didn't start focusing on the issue of the importance of having women on top of the list until the women's list came into being, and kind of the women were voting for the women's list, and so they were kind of forced to look at how they were, where they were putting women on the political party list. So nowadays, how many years later? 2020 from 1983 or whatever, you do the math. Yeah, 30, yeah, exactly.
30-something.
Now it's unthinkable for any political party to have a list for elections without women in the top seats. So, I mean, it has just become there is a social pressure for them to do so. I mean, they are ridiculed I mean, if a party has like a, a picture for the elections and there are like 5 guys or something, people are like, what these guys, nobody's going to, elect them. So it's really kind of has become, a thing that you need to do. A political party has no, is not sort of worthy to be elected if it doesn't have women in the top seats. I'm not saying every party has a woman at the top, but in the first 3 to 5 seats, that there need to be 3 women, 2 women, or whatever.
And Rwanda even has the most women's representation in terms of percentage in governing.
So for us, we started it from the get-go because we are looking at a country that lost 1 million people within 3 months.
Right.
3 million people leave the country. The few survivors, most of them are women. So we had really to put together all the energies, and women were spread out in trying to bring people together to rebuild the country, to be part of this. So in our situation, when you look at our country, quite frankly, it collapsed. All the institutions collapsed. We didn't have anything left standing in 94. So when we talk about our country, it's like 26 years old.
Rebuilding.
Yeah, it's really, it's a young country, we are building, but we felt that from the moment we started building, we needed to take everybody. So all the positions have to be open. I can give you an example before, in our tradition, you couldn't find a woman going on top of a house building. It was against the women thing, traditionally. But we ended up now becoming, to go to the army, become, police women. In peacekeeping, we are, we have police women, but also building, doing all kinds of non-traditional jobs. So it was imperative that women are empowered quickly, and we had to do many programs, including educational programs, so the women who were traditionally left behind are able to participate. So you have many different things. But it had also to be within the legal framework. The constitution was changed in 2003, so the women could be included within the political and economic social life. Yeah. So we started that, and there was a guarantee within the constitution at least 30%. But then women were able to surpass 30% because of the attending programs. They were able to go to school. They were able to go to science and technology, that now the best woman, the one who is heading the economic life of Rwanda is a woman. So we are able to, they were able to start from the beginning as we were moving the nation. Yeah.
In Afghanistan, I want to get your sense of the implication for women of the peace talks that are happening now between the U.S. and the Taliban. You were very eloquent on this topic on an interview you did last week on NPR, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on what that means for women in your country.
Afghanistan has been now in conflict for over 40 years. When we are talking about peace talks, we should also think about what does peace mean for people who have been in conflict for 40 years. I can just tell you that this is certainly not only the absence of militaristic violence. There is more to it. In this 40 years, we have experienced few different regimes, turmoils, conflict, famine, drought, you name it, displacement, so much. But in 2001, when the U.S. intervened, that was a moment of peace for the people in the country. That was when people felt that they were that dark life that they were living under the Taliban came to an end. They started to have hopes and dreams again. And now that, of course, military intervention. There has been a large number of foreign troops in Afghanistan, different levels at different time, and there is the decision to reduce that number, which is fine. For us, a peace deal would mean a settlement in a way that people will find themselves and their futures in it. There has been a deal between U.S. and Taliban. The peace is supposed to be negotiated between the Afghans. We were hoping that this agreement between the U.S. and Taliban would facilitate a political settlement between the Afghans. Unfortunately, just 2 days after the agreement, the Taliban started striking again. In the past 24 hours, I received the news that they have launched 30 attacks in the country in 15 provinces. So they are just testing and seeing what is the threshold, and that's the recent attacks, and finally, and also the U.S. at one point started to retaliate and started the airstrikes back as they had promised. But that makes us quite worried that the peace agreement, the agreement between the United States and the Taliban was welcomed by Afghans, especially that it was preceded by a week of reduction in violence as a window of hope and opportunity. People were very hopeful that it would lead to an end of the war, and we still are. We are looking at it as an opportunity. We are hoping that it would lead to the resolution of this conflict. What is disheartening is to see that the Taliban are still trying to use the only tool that they have as a leverage, which is violence and killing of people. Conflict is bad for everybody, but it's particularly terrible for women because it affects women in way more ways than it does all the other members of the society. There are ways that people would not necessarily know about and think about unless they experience it, including constraint in mobility, violence in the household, lack of access, lack of employment, the burden of the displacement, children, economy, everything. It is, but mostly it is just promoting a culture of violence in which women become a lot more vulnerable.
You said, I read a quote from you that said, the issue of women's rights is not really an ethical issue, it's a matter of national security for our country, for the region, and for the United States.
Yes. I believe, well, it's not only my personal belief, but it is a fact that, and we have seen it firsthand, that the minute that you discount 50% of your population, you put them under oppression, you do not, you make use of their potential, you are just providing a ground for extremist ideologies to grow, for terrorism to be embedded. We saw that how it was used during the reign of the Taliban in Afghanistan, where a woman was not allowed to get out of her house without a male escort. Women were whipped and lashed on the streets. They were executed and amputated. How would a family be a normal family, making a normal society and a nation, if they are raised by a disappointed, sick, hopeless mother? That's just the core of it. But that's a lot more in every walk of life, as my colleagues here are discussing. It's a proven theory that GDP of a country is directly correlated to the gender equality. It is in terms of the security for the vile extremist ideologies to grow, it is the best to oppress women. I want to mention a quote from one of the members of the Congress who recently said that a terrorist is not afraid of anyone more than an empowered woman.
Dr. Mughairy, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on that, and also to talk about the issue of education. And women in Oman are highly educated, and in terms of political representation and their involvement in politics, a lot of it seems to have to do with a cultural acceptance by men in society. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, we're very lucky when His Majesty took over in 1970. Before that, we had only 15 kilometers of paved road. There was only one school for men, for boys. There were no school for girls. There was only one hospital, which was run by an American missionary. So because of His Majesty took over, and he was very progressive, and as I mentioned earlier on, he said the first thing was that women and children have to be they are part of our society, they belong in our society, and they have equal rights as men. When we opened our first university, of course, we have some very conservative families coming from the Middle East. We have conservative families, and then, of course, we have families who have lived abroad during the time before His Majesty, who are all welcome back to build the country. So these people who came back were very progressive, and they were open-minded. But so when we opened the first university, the conservative families were very skeptical about sending their daughters to the university. So His Majesty did not want to have two institutions where one was for the boys and one was for the girls. So what he has done is they attended the same classrooms, but the boys sat in the front and the girls sat in the back to make sure that the girls also had an opportunity of being educated. As a result, and I'll say something which you'll find very strange, in the engineering and in the medical school, there is a quota for girls. And the reason being, there was one year where the girls exceeded the boys, and for that particular year, there were only girls in the engineering and in the medical school. So the government has decided to have a quota whereby a certain number of seats will be there for boys. As I mentioned, we have women in all walks of life. Those who are in education, who are, professors, lawyers, doctors. The government does not interfere in how you live your life or how you dress up. So you find in Oman, two things that I'm always asked when I give a presentation like this, when I'm talking, is, are you allowed to drive in Oman? And for me, I find it very strange because here I am as a woman representing my country. And the only reason that I drive in Oman is because I can't afford a driver. If I could afford a driver, I wouldn't be driving. Unfortunately, we still have very conservative families. Man will always be man. The sad part is that we're still very cultural in a lot of ways. So when women stood up for election, and I mentioned out of the 40 women who stood for election, only for the Consultative Council, only 2 won. And the reason is because we're not familiar with the electoral system, whereby when somebody stands for election, you vote for them for what they stand for and what they can do for you. Not because you're my neighbor, you're my cousin, you're my friend, my best friend. So that is still happening in my part of the world, yeah. Yeah, and that's, yeah. As I mentioned, we have 4 out of the 26 cabinet ministers for are women. We have undersecretaries. Ambassadors abroad, we have only 2, myself and our ambassador in Spain. But in the foreign service, we do have a couple of women who are ambassadors.
Well, I want to be able to take some questions from the audience and start with any students that are here that may have some questions. We have a microphone, Jules? Yeah. Can you introduce yourself and let us know where you're from?
My name is Bianca Perger. I'm a master's student at the School of Public Affairs. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. I have two questions. So the first one for Ambassador Mughairy. Thank you for coming. I spent some time in Oman. I guess my question is more, how do you pair cultural conservatism in a country with political progressiveness and trying to kind of uniquely pair the two to work forward for more gender equality? And my second question, sorry, I took a lot of notes. My second question is for, of course, the ambassador of Iceland and my boss.
This was, I don't know
Not
what the
planned.
question is.
She doesn't know what the question is. Thank you also for coming. Of course, Iceland is, at the forefront in terms of gender equality, having the first female president and having equal pay. Or what would you say would be the next steps in terms of what you'd like to see Iceland take in terms of guiding other countries who are still confronting these imbalances abroad, not just as, a guidance in these areas as well as in development. Thank you.
Regarding how do we compare conservative families with political progress? That's the question, right? And of course you've lived in Oman, so you know how women are treated in Oman. It all comes to leadership. Because we have a progressive leader who has opened doors for us, it hasn't been very difficult. I remember coming back from the United States with my master's degree, and I was being an economist. I was the only woman in industry. Industry has always been a profession where it was a men's profession at that time, and especially in countries like ours in the Middle East. So I was the only woman. By the time I resigned from the government, I was just one of a number. There were so many women in industry working with me. I'm not saying that we don't have conservative people, we do, but it all comes down to leadership. And since you have a progressive leader, it opened doors for the women. I remember a few years ago, there was a team of senators from the United States who were visiting the Gulf, and Oman was the last stop. They met with His Majesty, and they thought they were praising His Majesty when they said, "Your Majesty, we're pleasantly surprised because in your team we saw a lot of women in the negotiating team." His Majesty looked at them and said, "Why are you surprised? Half my population is women."
Thank you, Bianca, for the question. You asked about next steps and how to be kind of, give good advice or guide those who are, still on that path. And I mean, there are some things that are really important. If you are going to enable women to participate in politics, there need to be certain issues there. And one is, of course, you have to have, paternal leaves. You have to have leaves for parents, both men and women. And that's linked to my second point. And you have to have affordable childcare. We have a fairly young prime minister, a woman in her early 40s. She has 3 sons. She says, "I would not be here. I would not be the prime minister of Iceland if it was not for paternal leave and affordable childcare." So you need to have some, you have to have some ground there so that you can, otherwise, unless you can afford a driver and a nanny and all of that, which most of us don't. The second part, I mean, the next step sort of, and I find that it's linked to what you said, Eats for Equality was the hashtag for this meeting. And that is to engage men more with this. And that's what we are trying to do now, and we have been doing since 2000 by, for example, introducing parental leave for fathers. And so fathers take 3 to 6 months at home with their children. So it makes, for example, employers, they cannot, I mean, I'm not saying that they would ask the question, but they would think it, hiring a young woman, the risk of her, having babies or whatever, but now they have the same risk with a young man. So it really, it's a very important issue for equality. And so we are now very much working on engaging men in the whole processes. And I think that's the next step.
Good evening. My name is Rihanna Oskley. I'm a recent graduate of the Washington College of Law here at American University. Thank you all for hosting this event and for taking the time. This is actually in response to Ms. Fischer and Her Excellency, Mr. Rahmani. Once we both spoke about, you spoke about, I want to be doing something else. I want to be obsolete in a few years. This shouldn't be an issue. And Mr. Rahmani was saying, well, in my culture, there is a role for a woman and a role for a man. And it doesn't necessarily always make sense to me. In the United States, we have taken that conversation to another degree where we say, what does it mean to be a man or be a woman? And when somebody questions a gender binary and then also tries to step into politics, there are extra barriers simply beyond your gender. It's whether or not you conform to an accepted role of what a gender even could be. In the United States, we have maybe a half dozen non-binary, transgender, statewide office holders, but there are no national office holders. And I'm curious, in any of your countries, whether there's a conversation about how non-binary individuals can play a role in gender equality, and whether or not that's a discussion. What is the state of affairs as far as a woman politician when somebody comes to you as another multi-dimensional individual who feels marginalized? How do you approach them with your lived understanding of what it's like to not be, the perfect mold of what your society is expecting for your role? Thank you.
I would try to respond to what you said last. I mean, oppression and inequality is what it is. It doesn't matter if it applies to 1%, 50% of the population, 30% of the population, whatever it is. It should be seen and handled the same way. When I responded to the question and explained the binary gender roles, I mentioned that in the context that was the reality that inspired me, looking at one side and the other side. But of course, there is, I believe that equality is it's a natural state. Anything other than that is oppression, and oppression is not acceptable. So if I have lived in a context that there has been oppression exercised against women, I do not see that why would it be different with people who are not categorized in any of these genders differently.
Yeah, I can just say, I mean, because we're talking about the next step, I mean, that's the next step.
Right.
And I can just say in Iceland, this is really what is the issue at hand now. I mean, and the government has really made this, a big issue for us, especially in our dealings, for example, when we were in the Human Rights Council and when in our development cooperation, we have even had focus on this when accepting refugees to Iceland, because we know they might not, be, it may be more difficult to live in other places. So this is definitely something that is of huge importance in all of this, and as I said, we are still learning, but it's very much on the agenda, especially of our current government.
The question back there?
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Savannah Lane. I'm recently affiliated with Vital Voices and Running Start, women's empowerment organizations, and most recently worked with women in women's cooperatives and displaced refugees in Morocco with the High Atlas Foundation Open Hands Initiative as a Salam Fellow. So my question is really open to anyone on the panel, but how can we encourage women who are refugees or displaced women resettling to be part of peace processes and conflict resolution, or even part of political leadership when oftentimes they feel in survival mode, perhaps? So how can we encourage them to be part of this process, encourage them to be part of political leadership, and also from an outsider's perspective, coming in and trying to help? What is the best way to empower women in that type of situation?
Thank you for your question. From my perspective, I have to say that actually being a refugee woman, because I was a refugee, I lived in refugee camps. And I think whatever I've learned, I learned from there, not from the classroom, including the survival mode, but also to understand that survival means that you needed to do a collective action. That's why we became activists and we're trying to do those kind of stuff. And I think we are talking about women empowerment, we are talking about all these things, but we have to go with the political will to obviously empower women, because if you have men who are opposing it, it will never happen. That's why the collaboration with men is key, but also the political will, like in my country. But at the same time, also women had to find their own sphere of influence. The women were pushing. Throughout our misery, if I can call refugee camp a misery, but we're always agents of our destiny. We had to push. And what happened was that, maybe like a cliche when you say you become your brother's keeper or your sister's keeper, and you empower other women and you work together, you push, you come up with, you can't do anything without looking at the good practices from other people. In my experience, I can say that whatever I've achieved, it's not because it's those women who were refugees, but also friends who were American friends who could bring quality added type of ideas where I can use them in my own place where I am, like what you were doing. So I think it's very important that we find that sisterhood that is transcending the categories you are in. You are not just a refugee, you are also someone who can reach out to people in academia like this and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much what I can say about being, you never see, even in the worst confines, you are still an agent of your own destiny. We are not victims. Yeah, it's true that there is a victimization, especially when it comes to places of conflict, because the biggest victimization, like in my case, in my country, it was rape, it was many different things, but some of the best organizations come out of Rwanda in rebuilding, where women who were raped were left with HIV, and yet were able to expand wherever they were going. So we never lose our agency, and that's what I would tell young people: never lose your agency wherever you are, whether you are in a refugee camp, whether you are in the White House, whether you are wherever you are. And that's what I really. Thank you.
The question?
Thank you so much to all of you, Excellencies, and congratulations. It's not usual to see women as ambassadors. And I have a question especially for His Excellency from Afghanistan. What is the percentage of women ambassadors from your country? This is the first question. And my second one is, how have you been able to reach that position? because I knew that I learned a lot about women rights issue in your country, and I'm really impressed. My name is Lucy Kugwangrawa Kupuri, by the way. I just graduated from WCL, American University. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Right now, we have 3 women ambassadors, but let me go a little bit beyond, okay? We have 11 women deputy ministers. 28% of our parliament are women. The heads of the election commissions are women. The head of the Independent Human Rights Commission is a woman. Afghanistan's ambassador is a woman. 48% of our community development councils are headed by women. 38% of the provincial councils are headed by women. And the list goes on and on. We have them as volleyball players, as paragliders, as soccer players. They're learning to drive in the most conservative provinces. And this has all happened in the past 19 years. All of this. It's not the first time that women have a role or agency in our country. In fact, in the 1920, the right of vote was granted to women in Afghanistan. In 1964, they were granted the equal right in the Constitution. However, because of the war and everything, it was all rolled back. So, how I got here, this is an important question. Of course, for every woman that gets anywhere, at least the experience I have had, proves to me that they have to work at least few times more than a male counterpart, because the boards are always high. I was just in Afghanistan last week, and the women were meeting with the president. One of them went up to the podium and said, we might have had ministers who were less competent, less educated, as ministers, as deputy ministers, as officials, but we have not had any women who is not competent or not enough educated and whatnot in any of these positions. And having said that, and it kind of also binds to the previous questions, what enables women to get there? One is that you try hard, you work hard, but all of that would not get you wherever you need to unless there is a framework, there is an environment for it. And for that, especially for at the leadership positions, at the highest position, you really need a progressive political leadership. In our country, it's in just the last 5 years, the women role or the progress that they have made has been unprecedented in the course of our history. It is just because the president believes that women can do it and they should be given a chance. And it also binds to the previous question asked that in the refugee camps or wherever, in my belief, it is that just provide access. If people are able and willing to take up and move forward, once they have access, that opportunity, they will find their path. So in my case, it is really, the reason is that there was a government in place that basically appointed a woman that doesn't come from a political elite or family or somebody who would bring votes or win the campaigns to this position.
We have time for one more question. China?
Hello everyone. My name is China Brody. I'm a freshman in the School of Public Affairs, and I'm the Women in Politics Institute first undergraduate representative. I just wanted to say thank you so much for you guys coming out today. So my question is addressed to everyone on the panel. So in the United States, we are still facing the myth of female electability. We can see this through Elizabeth Warren currently right now going through it. Within the minds of a lot of voters, people still don't think women women can win, despite research and history proving that women are not only women winning, but have won. So my question to you guys, and also through Elizabeth Warren, she addressed this in the Democratic debate, saying that Bernie Sanders had insinuated a claim saying that women could never win the national presidency. So my question to everyone on the panel is, is this as much of an issue as it is in the United States? And where do you think we should go from here in terms of reshaping the narrative around women winning in politics? Thank you.
It's a very interesting question, especially for someone who is following, debate in the U.S. at the moment. I actually find it very strange that something like that is said about a woman. It's, for me, very old-fashioned, very strange. But on the other hand, I think if I compared Iceland to the U.S., I mean the whole system, the way you are elected first from the party to be the Democratic or the Republican person to, I mean, it's a very complex, very difficult system, and I think it really is a hindrance to women. I mean, to have women go, kind of break the barriers of the whole system also when it comes to the House of Representatives and the Senate. And actually I think all of us were there when the President was doing his State of the Union speech. And it was very strange for me to sit there, and then I sat on the Republican side, and now I'm not saying anything about the Republicans. But they were standing up, so I would see the back of them all, and it was only gray shoes. And for me, it's just, I mean, how can that be? It's very strange, but I think the system really kind of, the breaking up of the system it's very difficult for a woman to get through this, I think. So I'm not saying that you should change the whole electoral system. It's probably very complex. But I think the same here is more difficult than it is in like a country where you have the participants or the candidates are put on a list, and then you can follow who's, and then money, of course, which plays a very big role, which I find a bit scary. But
Yeah. You all have the enviable task, right, or not enviable task of trying to explain U.S. politics back home to your country.
We're still learning. Bianca's helping me.
Yeah. So I think we're going to end it there. I want to be respectful of the ambassador's time, and I so appreciate you all being here. I know you're very busy, and it's just been an inspirational conversation, and I think we all learned a lot, and so I want to thank you all for your time. There is a reception outside. We invite you to stay and enjoy that. I want to also thank our Women in Politics Institute staff, Julie Russell and Jessica Francis and Emily Martin for all they do. And thank you, Caroline Croft, and the School of Service for having us here for this evening. And thank you all for coming.